Christina from Card Making Magic. In the last video that I did, we added flowers to our cards, but I had lots of emails asking me about this panel in the centre, and so on this video I'm going to show you how to create this panel that will give depth to your card. So to create this effect, these are the dies that I'm going to use, but you can use any dies that you have in your collection. So this is the Grand Large Labels, this is the quatrefoil pattern and it's a beautiful die, and this is Fancy Tags 3 and I'm using the bottom tag. So let's just start by creating the base card. From the largest die, I've cut myself 2 pieces and they are going to be fastened together in the hinge card style. Now there is a video that will show you how to create a hinged card. You just need to search for it. From the second die down, I've cut 2 more panels which I have then embossed. And all I'm doing is layering those onto another piece of card. This is a coloured piece of card, so that it leaves just a small border around the edge, and once that's glued in place I'm just going to cut these corners off and that will give me that panel. Now these panels are going to sit one inside the card and one on the front of the card. So I'm going to go away and glue those in place and then we'll deal with the frame. So there's my base card created. On the inside I have my 2 panels. On the inside one I'm going to glue some ribbon in place and that's going to go inside the card flat. Then on the front of the card there's my second panel and that's going to be added to the card with some foam tape, and that will sit just along there. So once this is all created, I'm just going to pop that on one side and leave that all to just settle down, and we'll go ahead and make the frame. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut out the quatrefoil pattern, and that has a cutting edge all the way around, and so it cuts out the shape that looks like that when you've finished. Now you can extend that pattern if you wish, either widthways or lengthways, but that will mean cutting out more dies and taking off this solid edge so that you can then lay your die up matching the pattern, and that will extend your die. Just imagine that that solid edge isn't there, so that will extend your die by that length or longer if you've made this bigger. And the same with this, remove the solid edges, marry the pattern up, and that will extend your die by as much as you wish it to be extended. But for the purposes of this card I only need 1. So to create the first frame that will sit on top of the base card, I've used the second die down and I've used the last one. So those 2 now will sit together and they will create, once you cut them out, they will create that frame for you. And don't throw that central panel away, because we're going to use that later on the same project, but later on. So there's the first frame that's been cut out, and I'll just reiterate, that's the second die down and the smallest die. Now to create the second frame I've used the third die down and again the smallest die inside it, and that will give me the second frame. Now this frame I have put in an embossing folder and I've just embossed a pattern into it. Now you can stop there if you wish with your card, but I've created another frame, and with this one I've used the 4th die down and the smallest, and that will give me another frame. So now we're going to start layering the frames together. Because I've embossed this panel that's on the card, which is what I was intending to do, that embossing would be in the centre of that. But my film crew seems to think that a nice piece of patterned paper would look better. So if you're going to add some paper, this is where you add it. And then this gets added to the card with some foam pads. Now these are 3mm foam pads, and obviously they're a little bit too big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them up and I'm going to add them around the edge of the card, all the way around, and then I'll come back to you and show you what we do next. Now obviously if you're going to add the patterned paper in, you don't need to emboss that panel. That was just my idea, which got changed. So that's going to be glued in there. I've added my foam pads in on the back of my first frame, and that's going to sit along there. Now then, we're going to add the quatrefoil die in, but where you add this now depends on how much depth you want between this pattern and that. If you're happy with that amount of depth, then you can add your quatrefoil pattern in along that panel now. But if you want more depth, then you're going to glue the quatrefoil pattern to the second frame, and then once that's glued you're going to add foam pads along there, and then once that's glued in place it will have more depth in that central part. Now I've decided to glue my quatrefoil pattern to my second frame, and then around the edge you may need to cut your foam pads down, but you're going to add in your foam pads so that they sit along the edge. They don't show through the front, but they will raise your card up enough for the pattern to be with depth on the card. So I'm going to go away and glue all these in place, and I'll come back to you before I add it to the card. So I've got my foam pads in place, but before I glue that to the front of my card I need to decide where my sentiment's going, and I've cut my tag from Fancy Tags 3 and that's going to sit along there. Now if I just glue that in place it's going to flatten that grill, that pattern there. So to make sure that that doesn't happen, I'm taking a foam pad and I'm just cutting one in half, and I'm going to fasten these two together. Now the reason I need it double is because there's a foam pad under there and there are foam pads on there. So I need to make sure that that's in place underneath to stop my central bit from collapsing when I add the sentiment. So I've got my sentiment heat embossed and ready to go, but I've cut myself a blue one, the same blue as I used for the base, and I'm just going to cut that in half, and then with some glue I'm going to add it to my sentiment so that it leaves just a little shadow around each edge. So there's my shadowed tag. That's going to be added to the front of the card with some foam pads, and then on the top of it I'm going to add in the matching pearly bling from Want to Scrap. Now if you cut yourself 2 frames, that is where you will finish your card. You can add in any other embellishments that you wish, but if you remember I cut a 3rd frame, and so now with some foam pads on the back, this is where I'm going to add in that 3rd frame just to finish that card off with all the framework that I cut. So as a finishing touch, I'm just going to add in a little bow using the glue gun, the hot glue gun, just to glue it in that corner there. And then on the top I'm just going to add in a little pearl flower embellishment, and that will be the card finished. Now when we cut the frame out, if you remember, I said to you keep this central bit because you're going to need it. You can either use it on this card or for another project, and all I've done is add some foam tape to the back, and that's going to sit inside the card. Now you can add a verse, just a simple sentiment, or just sign it, but that is somewhere for you to personalise the card. And there it is now, all finished. You can see the depth in the quatrefoil, and the only drawback to this card is that it takes lots of layers to make. And if you make your cards to sell, then you need to reflect that in the price that you ask for a card like this, because obviously it's going to cost you more money to make it with all the layers.